Well, it's time to come back for our panel. Everybody's back and ready to go. Maybe you can give us a signal in the chat room. If you're there, give us a yes or a hello or a wave in the chat. That'd be great. Lucy, you're there. That's good news. It's very good to see you and to know that you're there. And Akima, I guess we'll be going to you to do the introduction in a moment. Oh, we've got you too, Akima. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the signals in the chat room to let us know that you're here and ready to go. That's great. Lovely. So we're kind of, yeah, give us your little signal, let us know you're back, and then we're going to go back into that more quiet space in the chat room as we begin to hear from the panel. So yeah, Akima, over to you for introductions.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, so this is our last panel of the of our time at the festival. So we're going to be discussing the question: are we on the brink of change? And Lucy will be chairing the panel. But let me just firstly introduce you to the panel members. Professor Peter Kinderman is Professor of Clinical Psychology at the University of Liverpool, studying the psychological and social determinants of mental health. He is a practicing clinical psychologist, clinical advisor at Public Health England, and former president of the British Psychological Society. He is author of various journal articles and book chapters, as well as a prescription for psychiatry, new laws of psychology, and a manifesto for mental health. He has received many research grants and acts as a clinical advisor for Public Health England. So, welcome, Peter. Next, we have Harry Cyril. I hope I'm saying your name right, Harry. Okay. Harry is a writer and speaker in his specialist area of social justice, equality, race and culture and mental health. Harry is Honorary Senior Visiting Fellow at the University of Central Lancashire and Specialist Guest Lecturer at University of Bradford, Visiting Lecturer at Christ Church, Canterbury University, and is a member of the Scientific Board of the ESRC, Centre for Society and Mental Health. Harry is a proud member of the Board of Trustees at the British Association of Social Workers. Welcome, Harry. We have James Barnes. James is a psychotherapist, lecturer and writer with a background in post-Freudian psychoanalysis and philosophy. His core interests are in relational, intersubjective models of the psyche and the demedicalization of emotional and psychological distress. He has a psychotherapy practice in Exeter in the UK and works with clients remotely. He is currently writing a book on the relational psyche for Confer Books. Welcome, James. And we have Rebecca Donaldson. Rebecca is a confessional poet and a doctoral student in positive developmental psychology at Claremont Graduate University in Southern California. Her research interests include adverse childhood experiences, narrative identity, and exploring ways to support individuals with histories of complex trauma. Rebecca writes and performs poetry about the harm frequently done by the mental health system to adults and histories of childhood trauma. She detests the label of borderline personality disorder and argues that dialectical behavioural therapy is inappropriate for survivors of childhood abuse and neglect. Her first collection of poems, Mad Women, was published this year. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you. And of course, me. I'm here too.
Thank you for introducing everyone, Akima. So, a little time now to think about, are we on the brink of change? So Bob Whitaker says, yes, we are. So that's good. We may or may not agree, but if we are, then I hope the UK is, to some extent leading the way in this, and AD3 doing its bit. So I've got some questions that the audience has submitted, but I thought I'd start just by going round. I'll probably go round in the order in which I can see you on my screen and ask you just your brief initial thoughts. Are we on the brink of change? And just before I do that, I just wanted to summarise some of the themes that I've heard emerging so far today, which are to do with it doesn't really work to kind of tinker with systems, according to some of our speakers. We need something more fundamental than that. We need a very different way of thinking. More connected. We can't really talk about changing the mental health system. We can't talk about other kinds of important changes. Really the complete failure of the current paradigm, but we've also heard that almost nobody in the general public knows about it. And we've also heard how we need love, rage, connection, attention to trauma, hope, courage, challenge, and activism. So that's kind of where we've got so far. But are we on the brink of change? I'm going to go to you next, Peter, because you're next on my screen. What do you think?
I hope so, but there are forces working against that change. So I think quite a lot of us in, I suppose, the communities that have been critical of traditional approaches to psychiatry have been talking about the conceptual models. And like Bob was talking about, we've been talking about the disease model, defeat depression campaign, serotonin, and other sort of monoamine neurotransmitter theories of mental health. And I think Bob's right. I think those stories have run into the ground. I think we've had a genetic approach. The reason why this person is depressed is because there is something wrong with their serotonin, then there's something wrong with their genetics. And we've had those models. And I think those of us who've been critical of that approach are hopeful, because we say, look, the curtain's being drawn back on the magic wizard in Wizard of Oz. We see that there's no evidence for those models. Therefore, the system will change. My fear is that I might have been fooled here as well, which is I'm not sure that the edifice is actually built on those models. I think in some ways, the Defeat Depression campaign, the marketing around the drugs that correct, of course, non-existent chemical imbalances, the focus on genetics, in a sense, is academic and scientific cover for blame the person. Don't change the system. Hand it over to the medics because they'll deal with the detritus of society, wash our hands of social responsibility, let them get on with it. If they want to come up with a conceptual model that covers their asses, then they can. Meanwhile, we'll just ignore the needs of the most vulnerable people in society. And if I'm right, then I've been fooled, because I think that when the disease model is shown to have no scientific value, people will somehow go, right, well, we'll have a humanistic model, a model based on social justice and the provision of social benefits to people in most need. With this current government, I'm not sure that that's true. And, apologies to friends coming in from America, but Joe Biden isn't exactly a socialist, right? So, commercial healthcare companies giving us the bare minimum that right-wing governments will think we're entitled to of our own money, of course. Yeah, it's always been backed up by a disease model, but I'm worried that instead of saying, oh, look, the conceptual model for psychiatry for the last 50 or 60 years has no scientific validity, therefore we'll switch to a humanistic model based on social justice. I'm not sure that's true. I think they'll go, well, fair enough. We're still not going to give people the services that they need. And if it's the case that we'll fall back on some sort of right-wing ideology that you're just weak, you just don't have enough resilience, bad luck, then we'll fall back on that as a model. So I think that maybe what we've done is maybe we've been successful in the rather pointless exercise of winning the scientific argument. And what we now need is community activism to do the real stuff.
It's an interesting thought, which kind of brings up the question of, as you say, if the scientific narrative has changed, does the emperor just continue prancing around with no clothes? And if not, do we end up, what do we replace it with? That's a big question. Do we replace it with something as bad or worse?
Well, and my GP colleagues, that when I speak to genuinely my friends, I meet them in the school playground and they're GPs, what they do is they do the best they can. They're not resilient proponents of a disease model of psychiatry. They're giving people Prozac because what the hell else can they do? So,
well,
yes, they're not warriors.
They could not give people Prozac is what else they could do. But anyway, thank you, Peter. Next on my screen is Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca. What are your thoughts?
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I think it's a really big question to answer. I think that depending on the place that you're at and where you're working and what, if you're in developmental psychology, I think we're often looking at the harm that's happening in systems. But if you're in clinical psychology, it's a different narrative that's being told. And so I think it's a really big question to answer. And I really think we need to come together when it comes to developmental psychology, clinical psychology, all these different fields really do need to come together and discuss what's going on. I think there's a lot of activism going on at the grassroots level. There's Facebook groups like Drop the Disorder. I have a Facebook group, Stop Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. There's lots of people talking about this. However, it's a really big question, and we have to think about, what do we need for a paradigm shift? Is it that we have to wait until this old way of thinking dies off, or can we start doing it now? We have to really think about what do we need for that paradigm shift, I think.
Thank you. And I think paradigm shift, it's an overused term, isn't it? I think it is appropriate here because that's actually what we're talking about, isn't it? We're saying, I think we need it, but I think we're saying how near are we? Can we actually achieve it? Thank you, Rebecca. Akima, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have loads of...
Presentation is the answer. We have the answer. Thank you, Akima.
But there's something about, how far is that brink? Brink could be, miles away, or it could be just at that point, and I guess for me, patriarchy, neoliberalism, capitalism, it doesn't give up easily. It's a machine that's been trugging for a long time, and and certainly it's been, psychiatry, mental health is one of those state institutions that's been used to legitimize